You're listening to the Bug Bucks Podcast, hosted by Allan Draper and Eric Bassett.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Bug Bucks Podcast. I'm Allan Draper. I have Eric Bassett here with me. What's going on, Eric?
Hey, Allan. Not too much. Got some cold weather over in my neck of the woods. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, you got some late winter snowfall, which is kind of crazy. But dude, it's getting to that point where I'm a little bit like nervous about the season. You know, like things are happening. You know, like I got a lot of stuff going on, and I look outside my window and it's like white and snowy. It's throwing me for a loop, man.
I like late moisture in our markets. I really do, because then when it warms up, then just stuff goes crazy.
Oh yeah.
So you gotta work through it, but
yeah, when it's like spring rain is fantastic for us for ants. It works wonders for ants. So I love that stuff for sure.
For sure, man. Well, that's awesome. Well, it looks like we're live on, on Facebook as we're recording that. We're in our Bug Bucks group. So for the people, and we're actually we're killing two birds with one stone here. Where we're doing this live on Facebook in our Bug Bucks group, and then we're also going to use this episode and we're going to promote it on our podcast. So if for the podcast listeners, the people aren't watching this live, but the podcast listeners, make sure to go to Facebook, make sure to join our group, Bug Bucks, BUGBUX, and join the conversation there. Lots of great questions, lots of great conversations going on in there. We focus mostly on scaling pest control companies. We talk a little bit about pest control products, pest control techniques, bug identification, stuff like that. Not a ton. It's mostly like, hey, I want to increase my net revenue, or what are the financials that I should be focused on, or, things like that. So if you have a question, make sure to put it in the comments of this video that's live on in the Bug Bucks group on Facebook, and we'll try to get to them. We're letting people kind of get into the live feed right now. There's about a dozen or so. It keeps moving up and down. But we're going to have a conversation while we get started and get some good questions in there. But feel free to ask a question, and we're going to answer it in real time. So there's no delay here, like with some of our content, because it takes a little while to produce the actual podcast. So, before we get started, Dane actually, he made a couple of comments. One, of course, is about my mullet. Dude, bug guys love my mullet.
It's awesome, man.
It's
business in the front, party in the back.
Exactly. So I was in Idaho this past weekend, part of my son's Christmas present, and we went up there for the weekend, and I was at a pizza shop in a small town called Fruitland, Idaho, and it's Idaho Pizza Company. There are quite a few of them in the Boise area, but the guy that was running the cashier that was taking the orders and stuff, he had a mullet, and it was very similar to mine, but it was a little longer. And the people behind me, I had a hat on and I had kind of a big coat. It was cold. People behind me just thrashing this guy's mullet, dude. And they didn't know because, they're just behind me or whatever. But, I was like, dude, I kind of like that guy's mullet. So it's the bug folk that actually appreciate it. So, so Dane said, if I'd known Allan Draper was I think he means sporting a mullet, I might have thought twice about sending my daughter to sell for him.
Oh, cold-blooded. Dude, not everybody can pull off the mullet. You can. Looks good.
Dude, I'm ready to just shave it all. Ready to just... the mullet just came from... I just kind of got bored. So Yeah, but Dane also says he says he expects bugs to be crazy this year. But he said this, the constant snow. I don't know exactly where he's located, but he said it's making his season kind of a slow start. Let's start there, Eric. And we have some other topics that we're going to cover as we wait for some questions to come in. But do you look at weather as it all balances out in the end? So if you have kind of a winter that drags on, and I have markets in Utah, Denver, Reno, Michigan, Massachusetts, New York that kind of it's colder, especially like Northeast. It stays cold for a while, even into the month of May. Do you think that cold weather, especially when there's moisture involved, that it like actually, you catch up with that bug population? Or would you prefer that it got warmer earlier as opposed to having that moisture a little longer into the beginning of spring?
Preference wise, I like warm weather. I like a more temperate phasing over the course of a year. I talked to some guys who have a pest control company over in like Utah, like Park City, Utah. And like, dude, that's some pretty steep phasing. That's like you do nothing between the months of like October through April, right? And then from like May through September, you're just running around like crazy trying to get accounts and get stuff done. For our market in the Pacific Northwest, we get rain like the whole winter is either snowing or raining. And actually, we've got a lot more snow in the past couple of years than we used to. But, we still get calls for ants year round. Like if there's snow on the ground, we can still get calls for ants. We deal with a lot of moisture ants, carpenter ants. We deal with odorous house ants here. So moisture, we were kind of talking about this before we hit the record button. Moisture can be a good thing, right? It depends on the market. But I think it probably evens out. One thing that I like to warn people of is, if you're in a market where usually like things are pretty busy right now, like don't let the snow like stop you from preparing for things to still be busy by the time that snow melts off, especially like if that's not traditional to be cold that time of year, because the sun might come out and then you got to go.
I think that's a great point. Sometimes we feel like we can just, push pause and kind of kick our feet up, put our feet on the desk or whatever. And if you have those moments in your business, that's a great time. If you have that trigger, you should immediately think long term. Like, what am I doing that's going to affect the long term, goals of my business? Do those things right now. And we're a day away from March, so early spring is right around the corner, and you're going to get really busy. So focus on some of those longer term things while it's still a little cold. I wanted to ask you what, we had this discussion in our group, which I thought was a very interesting one. And based on some of your comments, I'm not sure you and I agree on this, which is perfectly fine. It's just, two different opinions. But what is your perception? What is your opinion of giving out free inspection / estimates as part of the sales process?
Okay. So, I do think that there's a place for free inspections. What I try to avoid is scenarios where, especially smaller, like one-man operations, right? You get a customer that calls in and says, hey, I'd like to get a quote for this. And that guy, his knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I'll just come out, right? Like, I'll just come out to your house. I'll do an inspection, because he feels like, one, it's probably not viable for him to do a bid over the phone. And two, he thinks he can close better if he's in person, which sometimes both of those are true. You probably could close better in person. And some things aren't really viable to do a quote over the phone. Termite work, maybe not so much. Bed bug, not so much. But I want to be careful, because there are a lot of scenarios that you can do bids over the phone, and you can save yourself a lot of time and money, because there's always a scenario where if you go out there and you spend your time explaining how a service works and what you would do and how you would do it and everything else, that customer's like, oh, that's not really what I'm looking for, or that's outside my, finances. And obviously you try to overcome those objections. But if that doesn't work out, then you've spent a lot of your time at that person's house when you could have been doing something else that's important. Now, depending on the size of company that you have, that could be a concern of yours, and it might not be. But for us, we have scenarios where a customer will call in and they'll say, hey, I need you, can you like identify this for me? Right? Like, I'm not sure exactly what pest problem I have. Can you like send somebody out to identify it and maybe I'll sign up? And in that scenario, I think a lot of people would probably just send out a technician for free. Like, yeah, just go out, identify it, see if you can close it. What we prefer to do is actually provide an official pest inspection. We call it an OPI, and we charge for it. And we provide a verified documentation of whatever the results are. And then we allow that customer to roll the cost of the OPI into the cost of the services we provide. So we provide a lot of OPIs for lots of different things, whether it's termite work, whether it's bed bugs, whether it's carpenter ants, or anything that a customer calls in and wants kind of identified. If we have to send out a licensed technician to go do it, we want their time to be paid for. And what's nice about that is if the customer can agree to paying for an inspection, the odds that they're going to roll that inspection cost into a service is really, really high.
Huge. They'll look at it as free money, right? They'll look at it as like, hey, that's just a discount that he's giving me.
Yep. So like I've done free inspections. I actually do send out my service manager on bids. We do those for free, especially for commercial properties and higher clients. That definitely happens. But I just want to warn against the overall philosophy of we always have to go out for free inspections. If somebody asks for them, we can't bill for inspections, that kind of a thing. It really depends on the size of your company and what you can accomplish over the phone.
At what point, this is interesting because I think there's some options here, regardless of how you approach the sales process, because at what point is it just pest specific where you will recommend an inspection, or if you have somebody that's having just a hard time wrapping their head around a quarterly service or whatever, that I think that, and I don't know, I'm trying to think if this is a good idea or a bad idea to give another arrow in the quiver of the sales reps, the inside sales reps. If it's like, hey, they're really struggling with the price, if you just backpedal like crazy, let's say they get to the point where they're like, hey, you know what? No, I'm good. I'm gonna call around and see if somebody's gonna do it one time, or I got to talk to my husband, or whatever it is. Right? No, that's too much for me. Whatever the concern is, I wonder if hey, what I can do is send somebody out. We'll do an inspection. I don't know if that helps or not.
I think when you consider that the end of the whole process is to earn a customer, right? You're trying to close the deal. And there are probably a few things that, I wouldn't do to get that customer on service, right? So, for example, I've been in scenarios where a customer will call in, they'll say, hey, I think I've got bed bugs, and I will do everything I can to verify the issue over the phone. I'll say, hey, can you take any photos? Do you have any pictures? Like, what have you seen? Tell me the symptoms, the causes, the scenario. We'll try to kind of verify the issue over the phone. And if we can't, and I said, hey, our only option here is to kind of send out a technician to do an inspection, and that would be like X amount of money. If they seem like they're on board, and we kind of talked about the general cost of what a bed bug service could include, if that makes sense to them, but they're like kind of concerned about the inspection fee and everything else, like I probably would still send somebody out there for free to get an inspection and close the deal, right? So sometimes we have those people who call in and like the service just doesn't make sense, or the pricing doesn't make sense, or like just based on quote unquote principle, they want to have someone come out for free before they'll sign or commit to anything. And I have sent out guys, like I'll message a technician or a service manager and say, hey, when you get a minute, you finish up with that service, can you zip over to this customer's house, and kind of show them a little bit what we do, talk to them face to face. That's kind of what they prefer. And if that happens every 100 leads, so be it, right? It's probably not going to happen very often. And I would totally do that to close a deal.
Yeah, gotcha. Our man Jonathan Robertson asked how much you're charging. What's the ballpark for that type of inspection?
So an OPI is usually $149, OPI official pest inspection. And then depending on what the inspection's for. So we have specific licensing in our markets that have to do with like wood destroying organisms. And so if somebody wants an official WDO or a WDIR report, we have to charge differently. So like we have specific wood destroying organism reports that we do for about 300, 350. And then we have complete WDO inspections, which is like looking at their entire house for specific types of damages, insect related damage, conducive conditions, et cetera. It takes like a few hours. There's a full report you have to write up, and that's like $500-$600. So those inspections could be anything from 150 all the way up to 600. And then, we always negotiate a little bit. I think there's a scenario where I could charge like $100 for an OPI.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's, it's smart. Like, and I think the discussion, and we'll leave it kind of here. We have some other questions. And for the people that have hopped on just recently on Facebook, make sure if you have a question for Eric and I, we're going to be on for about another 10, maybe 15 minutes. Just drop in the comment section your question or a topic that you'd like us to cover. But kind of wrapping up this idea of inspections, I think the conversation was, hey, you're professionals, you should be charging for your service. And I agree with that. I feel like a lot of people in our industry, especially in some of my markets, especially in Arizona, the really competitive markets, man, they give their service away. They look at it as a loss leader, which I have no problem with that as long as there's this long-term plan. And I think that's my ultimate position on this is how does it, don't be swayed with what, people are saying or what one particular customer says or this anecdotal data. Find out if it works with the culture and the systems and the goals that your company has. If it fits in with that, we at Proof, we try to close people on the phone. Obviously not with termite, some other things, but and we have a structure set up where we will split commission with technician that goes out and does an inspection. Even if, that it ends up getting passed back to the inside sales rep, but the rep can schedule an inspection on technician's route. But I think the ultimate goal is when we send technicians out, we give them some ideas about what the customer told us. Obviously, in a lot of cases, they're going to go out there and they're going to find something that's completely different. And so the technician we're not pigeonholing them into this is what you have to do. This is how you have to treat. This is the pest that they told us what it is. Because it's usually a different scenario, especially when you get an expert out there and they're out there actually doing an inspection versus just seeing, the customer that saw something crawl through the kitchen. So just make sure that it fits in the, the process of your business. Let's see. I lost the question, but somebody asked about what the KPI of door to door should be. I'm trying to pull it up so we can kind of get the specifics of that. So let me see if I can find it here.
looking for that, I just wanted to kind of list off one thing that's interesting is like door to door as something that's measurable with KPIs. I mean, we could be talking about what's measurable from like a recruiting standpoint, from like attrition standpoint, from like an actual like on the door standpoint, like how many doors you want to knock, how many people you want to talk to, how many pitches, how many closed sales, that kind of a thing. So there's a lot of different ways we could go with this KPI thing. So I wanted to see if there was any indication. Were they more specific about which type of, like what part of door to door they were talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question was, it comes from Gary Fosser. Mm-hmm. What are your KPI related to door to door? What should I budget for 5, 10, 15 size door to door team? Paraphrase that a little bit.
So the budget. So here's the thing. If this is your first year doing door to door, man. So like knowing that 5 to 10 to 15 guys, that might be a wild, crazy year if it's your first year. Mm-hmm. Because the other thing you have to consider is, and I don't know if he's done in recruiting up to this point. If this is the year he's talking about, I'm assuming he's already done recruiting. But
and whether this is a marketing deal or they're his own, Gary, if you're still on, if you don't mind replying in the comments, whether this is your team you built or a marketing company. My guess is it's a marketing company.
Yeah, if it's a marketing company, that's a little bit different. I mean, in some ways, marketing companies are easier to budget for because they're going to give you numbers ahead of time. Like when I've talked to marketing companies,
they're his own guys. He said they're his own guys.
Okay, all right. So if they're your own guys, and I'm assuming you've probably done the recruiting already, then you just have to figure out based on your pay scale what you assume the average amount of accounts is going to be per guy, what you're going to end up having to pay out, and by when. I'm assuming you probably have some type of a back end model. So you're paying some upfront commissions for accounts that get sold and serviced. So you're going to have to account for that. You're going to have to budget for uniforms. You're going to have to budget for events. You might have to budget for apartments. If you can kind of outline all your aspects for the different things that come into play, you can kind of figure out your budget. And then once you have that number, I mean, the best thing is that your guys will perform better than what you expect. So you have to be able to have a little bit of wiggle room. You're going to collect some revenue on these accounts as they get serviced, but if you're billing, especially billed per service, you're not going to collect that revenue very quickly. So you just have to have some wiggle room in case your guys overperform what you're expecting. Because the worst thing that you can do is take all the time and energy to recruit and get these guys going and then not be able to pay their back ends. So I don't know what your financial situation is like, but
Yeah. So they're his guys. He says he has 8 to 10 solid. Looks like the average commission rate's 50%. Those are going to cost him, including recruiting expenses. Those are going to cost him 75%. So he has half rookies, half 2 to 3 years experience. If I took, just 1,000 random Pest door-to-door reps, from different companies and whatever, and I put them in, I threw them into one pile, and I took their total number of sales and divided by the number of reps, I'm going to be really close to 100. So I like using that number. It's the best number that I've been able to come up with. It could be a little higher. It could be a little lower. Especially if he says he has half new, half 2 to 3 years. He's going to have some people quit. He might have a buddy or two of some of his reps join on mid-season, but it's a hard and fast rule. It's nothing pretty and nothing specific, but I would plan on 100 per rep. And I would, if you're including your recruiting expenses, my guess is there's going to be some housing costs or some incentives or things like that you need to keep your teams happy. My guess is it's going to be around 75%. If you're in the 65 to 70, you're doing awesome. If your average rep is making 50%, so just take that as a budget. if you want more specifics than that, Gary, we'll just have to ask some more specific questions. But that's kind of my rule of thumb.
Yeah, that's a great rule of thumb to have. And yeah, just like Allan was saying, Gary, if you want more specifics, you can kind of outline, everything that costs money within your program and then factor it out from there. So
cool. We've got just a few minutes left. And we have a couple of questions, but let's go with this one. This is Jonathan Robertson again. He said, I'd like to hear your thoughts on growing into a new market with a decent marketing budget. How long on average does it take building a route?
So I'm assuming that he's talking about building through digital marketing.
Sounds like it.
This is what it sounds like. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a loaded question because it really depends on what other major players are in that area. So, if you didn't have a big pest control presence in that area, but it was somehow magically like high demand, like there was a lot of pest control, like pests issues there, then you could drop some digital marketing. And if there's high demand, you could build that route very quickly. It depends on how many people are there. And, with the marketing company, these are the types of assessments that they do preseason. If you look at a market and you look at how many people are there, how many pest control players are there, how many, like what types of campaigns those other companies are putting into that market. And when you say that you have like a decent budget, it's hard to know what that is. It really depends on the market and the demographic. So it's a hard question to answer.
Yep. My first question is going to be, why are you growing into a new market? My second question is going to be, by new market, do you mean like a neighboring market, or do you mean a different state, like entirely? I look at routes at least quarterly, between, depending on the service and depending on the route density, we're talking 500 customers, 500-600 somewhere, depending on service frequency and route density. And the question was, how long on average does it take to build a route? That's so 500-600 customers, assuming that you have a technician that can do all the services while you're focusing on the marketing and sales, or at least somebody else is. I just straight AdWords, just straight digital marketing. You can definitely do that in a summer, depending on your budget. It's not going to be door to door fast, because you're going to have some learning. You have to go through the Google learning phase when you start a new pay-per-click campaign that will slow you up. That's only about a week or two. But you'll have to dial in those AdWord campaigns and things like that. But if money is not an issue, then you're looking at least a couple of months, probably, if you don't do any door to door. And then that begs the question: if money's not an issue, why don't you use a door to door team?
Yeah, or
if we're talking about speed, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing we're talking to is, are we talking about adding in like a service area? Are you talking about having a brick and mortar in that particular location? Because from a marketing standpoint, having a brick and mortar in that location is going to have some advantages, right? But that has its own costs, which if you factor that into your customer acquisition costs, that's going to be different. But I
think another big question is, how big is the area? Like, what's the demand?
Yeah.
Because if you're waiting, because with digital marketing, you're waiting for people to come to you, is what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this question, like if someone said how long to build a route with door to door, that's easy to answer because that's all proactive. Yeah. If you're building a route with digital marketing, like if you have other markets that you've gone into that you can show me what campaigns you've done and you can show me the results of those campaigns, then I can use that to kind of give you an idea, right? But if like you haven't done this before and this is a brand new market with different campaigns, then anything could happen. Right. You could be at the end of that season and absolutely have a full route. You could have a route and a half or 2 routes. You could have a half a route. It just depends.
Yeah. And we've done this with a couple of our branches where we went just digital. We didn't do door to door. And in the beginning, it's slow. Google has to be able to trust you.
Yeah.
And it takes a while. So you're not going to get the impressions that you would with your branch that's been around for several years. You're just not. Google's not, no matter what you bid on it. And
Yep.
and then the market size is going to really come into play. So it sounds like he has a tech that lives in the area. It's about 30 to 45 minutes away from like the central part of his branch. And in order for me to do something like that, Eric, there has to be a very high ceiling because there's a lot of risk involved with that. It's nice to have a tech in an area, and we've expanded branches because we have techs in certain areas, and maybe he means 30 to 45 minutes from the center of what their service area was before, but I'm not expanding because I have a tech in a new area. I'm not expanding 30 to 45 minutes from the closest part of my service area that tech would be in, just because I have a tech. So, but he wasn't really asking my advice on that. So he just wants to know how long it will take. It really comes down to the size of the area, which is ultimately the demand. So how much exposure you're going to get. But I would plan on at least a summer. If that's a fairly large market, getting that stuff dialed in, that's a lot of accounts. 500, 600 accounts is a lot.
Yeah, and most times when people ask me about expanding into new markets, I'll talk about what their opportunities are within the existing market that they're working in, because for route density purposes and other things, like it's just more efficient to focus on what you have, right? But if we feel like we're kind of hitting the ceiling on that opportunity with the markets we're already in, and like there is a neighboring market that has more opportunity, then it's like, okay, like this could be worth it, right? And in that scenario, then it's really up to the marketing company to provide a good, thorough analysis on what the opportunity, quote unquote, opportunity is.
Yep, 100%. 100%. And Jonathan gave us a thumbs up. So, and he said the check's in the mail, Eric. It's like that was such good advice. He's like, you guys just got done talking about how if you're a professional, you should be charging for your services. Well, I guess we're a little different. So, well, awesome, man. Well, we were kind of kind of scatterbrained a little bit this episode. We hope that it helps. We're going to try to do these live kind of more interactive recordings, maybe once every other month or something. We hope that they're helpful. We're killing two birds with one stone. As I said before, we had quite a few people hop on and off. I know that right in the middle of your day is going to be really tough. So make sure to follow up and listen to the podcast, even though you might have caught a piece or two while watching live on Facebook. And then a reminder for the people that aren't on Facebook in our Bug Bucks group, join us, BUG, check us out there, ask a question, get involved in the conversation. Our ultimate goal is for us to help you build your PCOs and create this community PCCs for us to help you build your pest control companies, and for us to create this community of PCOs that kind of understand one another and can help each other out. One of my favorite things about this industry. So, great episode, Eric.
It was an awesome one. I like doing this whole live Q&A thing. I think, every other month, something like that will be fun.
Yeah, very cool. All right, guys, we'll catch you next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please show your support by subscribing and leaving us a 5-star rating. Thank you, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.